Hey everyone, Todd from Sideshow Effects once again, and in this video I'm going to run through the installation process of our color panel for Davinci Resolve on the Stream Deck Plus device, and this is the Mac version now. Now we're going to walk you through each of the steps in order to get things up and running for you so that you'll be able to take advantage of all of the features that this suite of profiles has, including controlling your primaries, log color space, curves, qualifiers, getting things set up with your raw profiles, as well as sizing and key. We've got it all bundled in here. Now in your pack you've downloaded from Sideshow Effects, there is a PDF guide. I do recommend that you take a look through that guide first and refer to this video for reference should you need it. The PDF guide that's in your pack is the most up-to-date and is the most thorough. So it is always best to follow the installation process in that PDF and use it as reference material. Should you need further clarification, turn to this video, jump to the section you need help with, and hopefully it'll be a little more clear. With that said, once you download the pack, this is what you're going to see. Most of this pack works on our new plugin architecture that we built specifically for this pack, but there are some shortcut commands such as layer node, parallel node, etc. that do require a keyboard shortcut command, so we've included our keyboard command key file. We'll need to install that. So the way you do that, you go into Davinci, you go up to Davinci Resolve, go to your keyboard customization, and you click on this ellipsis here, and you go down to import preset. You navigate to your downloaded folder, and inside the keyboard command folder you will find our text file, which is our key command. So you will use this Davinci Resolve Sideshow Effects Pro 6 text file, and you click on it and say open. I already have mine loaded, and you'll see it appear here. And then you would say save, and then your key file is lined up. Now, as mentioned earlier, most of this pack works on our new plugin that we've built. You'll need to install this plugin. So it's here in the plugin folder with your Stream Deck software open. All you need to do is double click this file and it will load in our plugin. Now the next thing to do is we're going to load in the profiles themselves. Now when we open our profiles folder, and I'll expand this up so we can see what we've got in here, you can see we have several folders here. That is because we have in this pack 6 suites of profiles that are programmed for specific display resolutions. And we have a 7th, which is generic. So what you would do is identify what your display resolution is, and then you come back here and you would load up the profiles that correspond to your current resolution. If your current resolution is not one of the ones we've listed here, then you would load up the generic resolution. Now here I'll show you how to find out what your display resolution is. Just go to your Apple menu, go to About This Mac, and we can click on Displays. Depending on which operating system you're working in, you can click on Displays, and this one is demonstrating that I'm a 1920 1080 display at this moment. You can also, if you don't see it there, depending on your OS, once again, go to System Preferences, go into Displays, and if you've scaled your monitor, you can select, you can see which resolution you're in, or if you're in Monterey, you can click on Display Settings, and as you can see in this example, I have 2 displays. This is my primary display, and I can mouse over the one that's highlighted in blue, and it will show my current resolution. On this particular screen, I'm 2048 by 1152. So the reason for the different profiles here is we have pre-built several different resolutions that already have those coordinates programmed. Now these display resolution pre-programmed profiles work on single display Davinci workstations. If you're running a dual display, you will need to load up the generic resolution. So now that you've identified what your display resolution is, in my case currently I'm running a 1920 by 1080 resolution. So I would open up this folder and you'll see that I have several profiles available to me in this folder. Each one of these folders has a suite of 18 separate profiles. This is the way we build our Stream Deck Plus packs. It reduces the amount of scrolling that you would need to do if we packed it all into one profile. It actually is more efficient to work this way. So that said, how you load these in is very simple on the Mac, because you can just shift click, so you select all of them, and then we're going to double click and they will all consecutively load in. And there you go. Once we're finished, we can double check and make sure, going to the preferences and going to our profiles tab, that we have all 18 of our profiles loaded in here. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to interconnect all of these 18 different profiles to each other, so that when we press our back button, it sends us back to the main, and when we press a specific workspace to go to, it will go to that correct workspace. Unfortunately, at this time, Stream Deck does not have the ability, when we save out a profile, to retain that link, so you need to repoint it to where it needs to go. It's very quick and simple. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to load up the main profile. And you see on our main profile, we have some node functions. We have a load save memory folder, fixed node trees, and a printer light. So we're going to go ahead and move to page 2. So just by swiping over to the left. Now at page 2, we can see the start of our workspaces. Now each one of these is a switch profile key, meaning that when we press that button, it is going to switch the profile that is displayed on our device. So if I click on it here in the software, you can see it's a switch profile, and it's currently not pointing to the correct profile that we want to open. We want to open our color panel primaries. So we're going to click on this and just select our color panel primaries right there. So now that when we click on our device, it opens our color panel primaries. Now, of course, you see that we have a back button here. That back button needs to go back to where we were, which was the main. So we're going to click on it and select main. So now that when I press main, it takes me back to where I was. Now you notice it took us back to page 1. That's not what we want, because we were just on page 2 of our main profile. I'll switch back over to page 2 and go into primaries. So how do we make that go back to the correct page? We select it. You see we're still going to the main, but we want to make it go to page 2. Now when we press back, it's going to the correct spot. And we're going to do this for each one of these profiles. And we can go through very quickly and repoint them. Now we'll go back to the first page, and these are folders. So when we open up, and I'll click it on the device here, you can see we have some load save memories. Then we have our fixed node trees. But our printer light is not a folder, it's also sending to a workspace. So we need to click on this and just point it to printer light. Now we can quickly just go into each one of the workspaces and point them all back to the main profile. Now this one will go back to page 1, because that's where the printer light is. And we'll swipe to the second page. We've already done primaries, so we're going to log. And we want to make sure you go to page 2. And just continue on the same way with the rest of the profiles in your pack, pointing them back to the main. And don't forget to point back to page 3 when you're working with the workspaces that are on page 3 in the main. Now the way these pre-built display resolution profiles work is we've already programmed ahead of time with those resolutions where every element is on the Davinci interface in terms of XY coordinates. First of all, what you need to do is you need to reset your UI. So you can go into Workspace here, Reset UI Layout. You see it just changes a few things here. We'll put our scopes back on. It turns scopes off automatically. We're going to leave those on. That doesn't affect anything here. When I press Temp, for example, to start to control our temperature, you'll see that our mouse will jump to the temperature location. Now you see on the far right dial that we have here, there's a dial stack indicator. That indicates that there are functions nested inside of this dial command, and by pressing the dial we can access them. So when I press once, you can see I get a controller here. This will allow me to control any of the currently accessed parameters. So you see when I press temperature that my cursor is going to jump to that location on temperature, and using this controller I can then adjust the value. I can make it cooler or warmer depending on what I'm going for. Alright, so essentially that's how it works. So each key has a coordinate attached to it already, and by pressing on that button and rotating the controller dial, I can make those adjustments. Go to tint, I can start changing tint. Color boost, I can boost up my color, decrease the contrast. Alright, now they are pre-programmed and ready to go as long as you follow a couple of simple guidelines. Go to your project settings, and you'll need to go to color management, and if you're running the studio version, you'll need to turn on Dolby Vision, HDR10, and HDR Vivid. When you do, those three items get lined up here in the header, and it pushes these items down. This is how we've programmed the pre-built profiles, is with these three items on and these items pushed down. If you're running the free version of Davinci, you will not have these three items available to you, and so these headers will move up here and therefore be misaligned. That is why, even though you would be running a pre-built profile that we've already mapped, if you're running the free version, you'll just have to reprogram these locations. Now, if you have one of these pre-built resolutions, it's important to know that if you're running a dual screen setup, it does change the positioning of some of the items, and therefore you will need to use a generic profile. In addition, these were all built with the studio version of Davinci. So if you're running the free version of Davinci in one of these resolutions, you can still use one of the pre-built resolutions, but you will need to program these header keys here. Everything else in the pre-built profile will work down below, but these ones will be misaligned, and I'm going to demonstrate why that is in a second. Now the last thing that we need to do has to do with the dock. Now I've got the dock on auto hide, so it does not move the interface, but if I go over to the system preferences and I go into the dock and I turn off auto hide, you can see it moves my interface. So a lot of these controls will be misaligned to what we've programmed for the pre-built profiles. So you can do one of two things. You can auto hide the dock like I had there, or if you prefer to always have the dock visible, you will then need to maximize the Davinci screen, and that puts it back to where we need it to be. So you'd need to run Davinci in the Mac full screen version if you like to have your dock always visible. Now if you have your dock auto hiding like I do here, and you prefer to work in a full screen version by pressing the green button here, you can do that. It does not change the positioning of any of these items. It actually stretches exponentially. The more you get to the top of the UI, it stretches more. So it pretty much leaves these alone, leaves them in their same location. So that's if you have auto hide on of your dock. You can choose to run it in full screen or not. It isn't going to change our parameters that we've recorded for these pre-built profiles. So in summary, if you are running the studio version with a single monitor and your display resolution matches one of the ones we've already pre-built in the package, you can use one of those pre-built that matches your resolution as long as you reset the UI and you either have the dock on auto hide, or if the dock is not auto hide, you would run it in full screen mode. Plus, you would need to turn on Dolby Vision, HDR10 Plus, and HDR Vivid. Now, if you're running the studio version with a dual or single monitor and your resolution does not match, you would load up the generic profile and you would then go through and assign the coordinates for the keys that you want. If you're running the free version with a single monitor and your display resolution matches one of the pre-built ones that we've provided, You can use that pre-built profile as long as you reset the UI and you use dock auto hiding, or you have the auto hide off and you maximize your screen. In this situation, you would only need to assign the coordinates for those header keys that would get moved down because you don't have the Dolby Vision HDR10 and HDR Vivid, which pushes those items down. All the rest of the controls would be programmed for you. Now, if you have the free version and you're running a dual or a single monitor and your resolution does not match, then you use the generic profile. So even though I'm working in a pre-built profile, I'm going to demonstrate as if I'm using a generic profile and the positions were not recorded ahead of time. It's very simple. This is how you do it. In the case of temperature, if I want to record the position of where my temperature function is, I take my cursor, I'm going to mouse over the text of temperature. You can do the integer. It works better with our plugin if you can, where available, use the text. So I'm hovering over text. I go to my device. I'm going to press and hold temperature for just about a second. You'll see a green check mark indicating that that position is now recorded. Now when my mouse is somewhere else and I press temperature, it jumps to that location. I can use this controller to change that adjustment. And you can do that for any or all of the parameters in Davinci that you want to use. If you just want to do a few to start and you find you need to access other ones later, you can do them at any time. And like I said, they're always saved with your profile. So that's how you do those primary controls. You can see we have the case of lift, gamma, gain, and if I press the dial stack 2 more times, you'll see we've got offset here. Well, how do we program the ones on the dial strip? Well, for the master wheels, we're going to take our cursor, we're going to mouse into the center of the master wheel itself, and as you can see, we have lift on our number 1 dial here. So we're going to press and hold on the dial strip itself until we see a location saved notification. See, it says location saved. Now, when I move the mouse off, all I need to do in this case is start rotating. I don't even need to press the button. It will automatically jump there and I can make my adjustment. Same thing with gamma. Position it where we want. Press and hold on gamma. Gain. And offset. Now I can adjust these and jump around very quickly to make the adjustments I need. Now by scrolling to the next page, you can see we have saturation and hue and luma mix. Once again, as demonstrated, you go over the text of each one, press and hold that button to achieve it. You have reset, you have your primaries wheel here. You would mouse over that, press and hold. And now if I'm working somewhere, let's say I'm working in my color bars and I want the wheels, I just click that and it bounces to it. Now you can see in the dial strip that we have a lot more commands here than we did in the previous one. That's because we have the ability to what we call dial splitting. So each one of these dials has 4 functions assigned to each dial. And so how we access each of these is we just press on that part of the quadrant above each dial that we want to make the adjustment. So in the case of if we want to adjust the luminance of lift, we click on that part of the quadrant and now I can make that adjustment. If I want to make an adjustment on green gamma, press green gamma, and blue gamma, blue lift, etc. In the case of the buttons above, if I want to adjust saturation, for example, I would press saturation and I would make sure that I turn on my controller for the 4th dial, and now I can adjust the saturation level. If you're working in a generic and you need to program these, it's pressing and holding on that part of a quadrant. So in the case of, let's do luminance for gain, because there is no text, we do hover over the value parameter, and we're going to press and hold the luminance of gain. and that has been recorded. And you would go through and do all the ones that you want to include. Now by swiping, we're back to page 1 of our primaries. You can see we have a primaries key here, and that will allow us to open up the primaries pane itself in Davinci. So let's move our cursor over the primaries header, press and hold. Now if we're working in another workspace, let's say we're in RGB, let's say we're on the main page, and we want to start doing some primary adjustments. We click on primaries and click on the primaries header. The first key opens our primaries profile in our Stream Deck device, and the second key opens up the primaries pane in Davinci. So if you're programming, follow along in the PDF. We detail exactly which keys go with which in case there's a little bit of confusion, but it's all pretty well laid out and self-explanatory. So now I'm on page 2 here. You can see that we've got color wheels accessible to us. How do we control these? Well, by clicking on any one of the color wheels, let's say we're going to work in offset, it jumps to that location. And now by using the right dial, I can either move left or right or up and down to make my adjustment. And of course, pressing on the offset here will allow me to make a master wheel adjustment in my offset. And like we saw earlier, we have several commands assigned to each dial. So depending on what you want to work with, pressing on the correct one will make those adjustments. Now this page has a few more commands. We see a repeat of the color wheels. However, these are more direct, meaning that all you need to do is start rotating these dials and you can make your adjustments. And we can easily just do a reset for each one of these to get us back where we were. And one more swipe, we're back to where we started. So that's quick navigation of our primaries there. Let's jump out. We're going to jump back to our main. If we take a look at log, it's pretty much the same as our primaries. And we have some jog and shuttle functions. And we can navigate our nodes. Same treatment as we saw in the primaries. And now HDR. If you've been working in HDR in Davinci, you're aware that the first 3 color wheels are scrollable. Let's switch to HDR mode here, and we'll switch to our wheels. And as you're aware, with the color wheels in HDR, we can navigate the first 3 wheels separate from the global. So by using these keys, we can change what those 3 color wheels will adjust. And by swiping over, we can access the color wheel controls. The first 3 will control whatever is currently present in the color wheels. Right now it's black, dark, and shadow. So by clicking on this and pressing my dial stack to get my controller, I can now adjust this value. And you'll see we have some dial stacks on this page for all of the dials. So we have our X, Y, and our fall off for each one of the dials, but by clicking on it we can reveal our exposure and saturation for each one of the wheels. Same familiar temperature, tint, etc. And then independent color wheels here, just by rotating, will allow us to make our adjustments. And here we can get into our zone graph, and these have been mapped to the different parts of the zones. And then back to page 1. Alright, back out we go. We're going to go into RGB Mixer. And by clicking on RGB Mixer, that opens up the pane for us. And of course, we can click on any one of these and start rotating our individual color channels. And you'll see that the color channel controls here are also repeated here, but they're treated a little differently. If we control these, you can see the pace at which we are able to adjust these. If I click on red here, you can see it's actually more responsive. It's a lot quicker, and this is a finer control. That's because when we program these get programmed in the center of the bar versus these get programmed on the integer value itself. It actually behaves a little differently, so that's why we provided both settings for you. Okay, now we can get into curves, and we can select our individual channels. We can change our luminance, our red, green, blue, and we have all the controls here of curves available. And then we get into color warper. Same thing, all of our controls are available here in color warper. Qualifier, we can fine-tune our color ranges for our secondaries. We have our matte finesse functions available here. We can immediately just start rotating to adjust these values as we see fit. If you're working at a higher resolution, you won't see matte finesse 1 and 2 because the resolution is high enough for Davinci to put all of the controls in one panel. They didn't need to separate them out the way they do in a lower resolution. So if you're working at higher resolution, you won't see the matte finesse 1 and 2. And here we can start to work with our individual color controls. So I'm going to do a pick or add. Select a region there. I'm going to turn on my highlights. And now I can make adjustments of my width, narrow it down if I wanted to, change my symmetry, adjust the high saturation, the softness of that saturation, change the low soft of the saturation, and swiping one more gives us the luminance controls down here. Now we can get into window, where we can create some power windows. We'll open up the window pane. Let's make a circle. Let's just position this over. Now I have control of my transform here, and I can, now you may find, we can make our adjustments here. Now you may find that the control doesn't work as quickly as you'd like, or perhaps it's too quick. These are adjustable. So in our Davinci software, you can click on the dial control that you want to affect, and you can see it's got a speed control here. If you click it onto fixed, this will be adjustable for you. You can then increase or decrease the speed at which things take place. Currently we have it set to dynamic, which means that the faster you rotate the dial, the faster the change will be. But if you prefer, you can turn on fixed, and let's check this way up back into Davinci, and then when I change my transform, it's actually a lot quicker for me. And so you have all the functions that are available here. You can have your softness controls depending on which power window you have selected. These will be available. All right, and now we can go over to page 3, and we have the Dolby Vision here. Clicking on Dolby Vision will open up the Dolby Vision pane. I don't have my Dolby Vision license on this machine, but you do have control of your primaries and secondaries in Dolby Vision. So if we sweep over here and we can turn on our primary, we'll have control over our lift, gamma, gain, etc. And in our secondaries, if we move over here, we have control of our saturations and our hues. Tracker. So we can open up the tracker pane, and we can make some selections here as what we want to track. We can go into tracker, and then we can start tracking our shot forwards and backwards. and we can turn on and off any parameters that we choose. And if we're in camera, for example, we can then get in and we can stabilize our shot and all the other functions that are available here. If you have the studio version, you can get into Magic Mask, and all these functions are available to you here. And step into Blur, and open our Blur pane. Swipe over to the second page, and we can start making adjustments right away of our radius, of our blur, our HV value, and we can lock or unlock our individual channels. We can get into key, and then we can access any one of these that we need. Swipe, we have control. Once again, our controller is hidden here. We can start making our adjustments this way. Click it a couple more times to bring these controls back. They do the same thing. It's just whether you want to press the button first or just start rotating the dial, whatever you want to start working with. So in sizing, you can see we have edit sizing here, or input sizing, what we want to work with. Swipe to the next page, we'll go into the input sizing, and then we have our controls here, and we can start making our adjustments. And we have all 5 here: edit, input, output, node, and reference sizing. Next one over is Camera Raw. So if you're working with raw files, let's say we have an RE Raw, move into that folder. Well, first of all, we have to get ourselves into Camera Raw. There we go. RE Raw. Because our clip is selected, all the RE Raw functions are available, and we can immediately start making our controls here. Same thing with Red Raw. We have the Red Raw functions and the Blackmagic Raw functions. Now custom. We've demonstrated how you actually program for the color parameters. Well, with our custom page, you can control any parameter you want. So I'll give an example. Let's load up our effects here. We're going to load up a glow. And let's say this is a function that I go to quite often, and I'd like to save those controls and be able to control them with my Stream Deck device. So we'll do the same sort of programming the way we did with the color parameters. You'll notice if I mouse over these individual OFX effects parameters, it does not give us the ability to make the change. You either have to move it with the slider or move it with the integer value. We won't go with the slider, we'll go with the integer value. So let's say I want to control my shine threshold. I'm going to mouse over there. I'm going to press and hold on one of the custom keys, and it has now remembered that location. And let's say I'm going to also change spread. It has saved that location. Now if I want to make those adjustments, I click on the one I want, and I can make my adjustments. Click to the second one, and I can make that adjustment as well. So if you can imagine, you set this up however you like for an effect that you go to all the time, you will be able to control it. And you can either do it with the dials, or I could have done the same thing. If I want spread to be assigned to a key instead, I press and hold one of the available keys, and then I can adjust it with this controller here. They both do the same thing. The only difference is you would have to hit the key first and then start adjusting here, versus this allows you to adjust right away. But if you have around 12 effects you'd like to have on one page, this is one way you can do it. Now back to page 1, we have our load save memories, and we have our fixed node trees, and this is borrowed from our Pro Pack. What these are a set of 7 fixed node tree structures that when you press the button, it will build out and label your node tree ready for you to start grading. So in the case of 4 nodes, I want to start with a simple 4-node structure. It will build the 4 nodes and label them for me, ready for my grades. And it goes all the way up to a 16-node structure. And then, of course, printer lights. Want to make some adjustments with your printer lights? We can immediately start accessing individual colors here with the dials or the luminance value itself. Swipe over, we now have our cyan, magenta, and yellow that can be independently adjusted along with the luma again there. So that's it. That's the entire color panel for the Stream Deck Plus device for Davinci on the Mac system. I hope this becomes a great addition to your studios and helps in creating better images. As always, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.